All right, guys, welcome back, all right, to the channel. So we're going to continue from where we stopped, right? So let's clear our screen here. Okay, so we've seen how editors work, right? We've seen Vim, we've seen Nano, and all of that. So basically, I told us that we're going to delve into permissions in Linux, right? Now, I quickly want to show us something, right, which is how to create a link file, all right, okay? Because when we did ls-l/usr/bin, all right, we saw that we had, all right, some link files, which are basically colored in the light blue. Okay, so now if you want to create your own link file, how do you do that? Now, one of the reasons for creating a link file, let me just share that with us, is that, sometimes you have a file in if an absolute path, and the path can be very long. For example, let's say you have something in, let's say, home/ubuntu, or /x/y/z/t/ all of these, it's a very long path, right? Now, what that means is that anytime you want to execute, let's say you have this index, all right, .html in that place. Okay, so let's say anytime you want to call this index.html, now you have to go all the way and navigate to this path. Now, that's a really long path, right? So what do? You can create what? A link file in your current working directory, or in a place that is, that you can easily just click and then you can call up the application. Okay, so that is basically why we need a link file. So which means instead of going every time all the way, all right, to these directories, navigating all of these, different directories before I can get to the file that I'm looking for, why not create a link file, all right, to that directory? Now let's do something. So let's create, I'm going to say mkdir. I want to create, all right, a very long path. So let's say a/b/c/d/ maybe ef, A, B, C, D, E, F, right? G, H. Okay, so let's say GH slash, let's just say index, all right, .html, right? Now, of course, don't forget our mkdir needs what? The flag -p, and then you press enter. All right. Now, if I do ls, of course, /tmp, okay, /a/b/c/d/e/f/g/h, all right, I can see that my index.html is right there. Okay, is right there. Now, it colored it blue. Look at that. So it created the index.html as what? As a folder, all right? Because we're using the mkdir command, right? So the index.html, it didn't create it as a file. It basically created it what? As a folder. Okay, so you need to take note of that. Now we need it as a file actually. So what we should have done is to stop at H and then use the touch command to now create the index.html as a file. Is that okay? But let's leave it as is. So let's practice how to create a link file. Now I am in my current working directory in /home/ubuntu, right? And I need to navigate to this index.html folder. How do I do it? Now, of course, that means I have to navigate /tem/a/b/c. It's a long one, right? So I can create what? A link file. So how do I do that? Now I can use the command ln-s. Remember, I told us every command in Linux can be used as standalone or with argument or options. Okay, so ln-s is actually the command. So the ln basically is to create a link file. So now, but if you want to look at the help, all right, what you can do with this command, you can just say -help, like we've been saying. Okay, so if you scroll up, it tells you what you can use. So the S basically means I want to create what? A symbolic link. That's what the S means. Okay, so that's what it means. So, and of course, here it gives you, all right, the information about that command. Okay, it gives you information about that command. Is that okay? So -s will help us to what? Create a symbolic link. Now, let me clear my screen. All right, so once again, I'm going to do tmp/a/b/c/d/e/f/g/h. All right, and then I have this. So this is the path that I want to create a link file for. So ln-s. Now I have to grab all of these and then put it here. /index. All right, .html. So I'm creating a link file for this particular source file. So let's see how it works, because the pattern can be funny sometimes. And I just want to call it, all right, let's just call this index.html. So that's the name I want to call the symbolic link. And then I press enter, right? Now, if I do ls, now I can see my index.html right here colored in light blue. So that tells me that this is what is symbolic link. So if I do ls-l, right, now I can see this L right here telling me that this file is what? Is a symbolic link file, which is pointing to what? This actual directory. Can you see that? So that's how you create a link file. So now, if I want to do anything inside of this particular folder, which I've linked to this guy, right, I don't have to go all the way to this particular path. I can actually do everything using this particular file. So now, remember, it created it as a folder, right? So that means I can do cd index.html, and then I press enter. You can see that it changed directory to that particular folder, right? You can see that it changed directory. So that means if I come here now and I say touch file2.txt and I press enter, all right, and I do ls, the file is created. Right now, are we even sure that this index.html, is not just doing it in our current working directory and the home directory? Now, if I do ls, all right, and I grab this particular folder up to this point, all right, copy that and then paste it here. And now, what do you see? txt is right there. Okay, so now I can interact with that folder without going all that way, okay, specifying all of the path. So whatever it is I want to do, I can actually do it right inside of, all right, this link file, and then it affects, all right, the actual location. Okay, so for example, now if I call this command up again, for example, all right, and I do cd, right, now I am inside here, I can see my file 2. So which means now if I do mv, all right, file2.txt to file3.txt. Now remember, I'm moving, right? And I do ls, I can see that I've renamed that file to what? To file3. So now if I go back to my home directory, remember your tilde sign, all right, and I do ls, okay, so if I do ls index.html, which is a link file that is in my current working directory, what do I have? File 3. So which means if I go to the absolute path and I edit the file, it affects the link file as well. At the same time, if I open up the link file and I do any edit or I do any delete, it also affects what? The absolute path, all right? The main folder in the absolute path. Okay, so that is what a symbolic link is. But you can see that creating a link file makes it easier for me, all right, to actually just work within, all right, my working directory without having to navigate all of that path. Right? So that is the purpose of creating a link file. So now, whatever I want to do, all right, in this particular location, I can do the same thing as well using this link file, and then I'll get the same result. So that is the essence, all right, of creating a link file. I hope you understand that now. All right. So now let's delve into the world of permissions. Now, the link file that you have created, you can also unlink it. Okay. So if I say unlink, all right, index.html, then I press enter. If I do ls, the file is simply gone. All right. It's as good as it deleted the link file. So there's no longer a link, all right, between the file is gone. Okay, so just using the word unlink, and then you put in the name of the file, and then the link is broken or deleted. Is that okay? All right. So now let's go ahead. So let's look at the creating users in Linux. Now, there are two commands that you can use to create users in Linux, right? So there's the user add, all right, and then there's also add user. Now, isn't that interesting? Now, on Ubuntu, because we're using an Ubuntu machine, right, we're going to start up, right, another Linux OS, all right? I'm going to show us some differences as we go on. But right now, we're using an Ubuntu, all right, Linux OS. Now, there's user add and there's add user. Now, what's the difference between the two? Now, let's take a look. Now, if I say user add, let's say Shim, I want to create a user called Shim. Now, it is not going to work, right? Just using it like this. Remember, I told us that anytime you see the $sign, it means what? A non-root user, right? So now what I want to execute, this command that I want to execute is a command that will affect this particular location. And a non-root user does not have any permission, all right, to edit this particular file. Hence, permission denied. Is that all right? Permission denied. Because you are going into a root directory that the user Ubuntu does not even have permission to write into at all. Okay, so it tells you what permission denied. So how do you go about this? Now you can do sudo, which is basically you want to execute the command, all right, as a root user without leaving, all right, your prompt, right, without changing, all right, completely, all right, as root user. So you can use the word sudo. So if you use sudo user add, and then you say chown, right, of course, it's not going to return an error because now with the sudo command, it basically is seeing the Ubuntu user executing that command with elevated privilege. All right. So I can say sudo user add chown, and then it's not going to give me any error. Okay. It's not going to show any error. Now, one of the things that you must notice is every user that you create, a record is actually created for them in this particular folder /etc/passwd. Every user on your Linux machine has a record here. Okay, so now if I do sudo, let's say cat, I want to view the content of that file, right? So I'll say etc/passwd, and then I press enter. Now right here, you can see the shell user has been created, all right? And then there's a home directory created for that user, right? A home directory was created. So now the shell user has what /home/shell, all right, folder. And then of course the user can also execute some, all right, some shell commands. Basically, it also has a shell prompt as well. Now, if I want to navigate to that user, what do I do? Now I can do sudo, all right, or I can say su hyphen and then the name of the user, and I press enter. But that is going to ask me for a password. Remember, this user that we created, we didn't create a password. He just created the user. No password, nothing. Right? So we don't have a password. So what do I do? So now I can execute another command, sudo passwd, and then the name of the user. So basically, I want to create a password for my user, right? So I press enter. So it's asking me what is the new password. So you can put anything you want, for at least for learning purposes. So the password has been updated successfully. Now, if I do su hyphen the name of the user, and then I press enter, and then I put in the password, right? Now look at what it says. It says warning, cannot change directory to home/shell, and it says no such file or directory. But wait a minute. Here in the etc passwd folder, we saw that there was actually this /home/shell directory that was created. So what happened? Why is it saying there's no such file or directory? Now, if I do pwd to just check my present working directory, now what am I seeing? I'm seeing what? /home/ubuntu. That's strange, right? Because I mean, I'm supposed to be in /home/the user, right? But I'm seeing /home/ubuntu. So that's kind of strange. So let's go back out using the exit command. Okay. So now let's do sudo su. All right. So if I do sudo su and I put the name of the user, now let's see what happens with that. All right. So sudo su chown. So let's say the pwd. Now I'm still in /home/ubuntu. Okay. Now that is kind of confusing. So let's exit again. Okay. So I'm trying to show something. Now if I do pw, all right, I can see that I'm in Ubuntu. Right. Now I am supposed to get into, all right, /home/chown upon logging in as the chown user. Right. Now if I come here and I say ls/home, now what am I seeing? I am only seeing the Ubuntu directory. All right. Now, if I should go based on what I have here, I should actually find another directory, right, called chown inside of this word /home. All right. I'm supposed to find it. Now, that is the drawback of using the user add command just as is. Okay. Remember, I told us from the previous videos that you can use Linux commands just as they are, or you can decide to use them, all right, with arguments. Okay, so I'm just trying to show us the drawback of using the user add just as a standalone command. Now, if you use it as a standalone command, it's not going to create a home directory for your user. All right, and that's one of the drawbacks of, all right, the user add command, using it as what? As standalone. Now, let's delete this user and create it again. So I'm going to say sudo, all right, user del, all right, and then the name of the user, right? So my user has been deleted. So if I want to be sure it has been deleted, I can say sudo cat /etc, all right, pass wd, and then I press enter, and now I can see that the user, all right, is gone. Okay, the user is no longer there. Okay, so let's clear our screen. Now, if I want to create my user, I'll say sudo user add -m. Okay, do you see that now? Hyphen what? M. So what is -m? So let's look at what -m is. -help. Now, if you come here, -m means what? Create home, which means create the user's what? Home directory. Remember, when we use it as standalone, it didn't do that, right? It just created the user like that without a home directory. And so that was giving us issues, right? Now, so if I say sudo now, all right, add -m and then the name of the user, right? So let's press enter and let's see what happens. So now the user was created. So if I do ls/home, now I shouldn't just see the Ubuntu user, the Ubuntu directory. I should see what? The chown directory now. Can you see that? So there's a directory now for what? For the chown user. So it created the user and also created what? A home directory using that argument. Is that okay? So now if I do sudo cat, all right, /etc/pass-wd, all right, so I can see it right here as well. Now, this was here earlier, right? But now we can see that it's actually real. So let's update the user password. So sudo pass-wd is chown. So give it a password. All right, we type the password. So now if I do su-chown, all right, and then I put a password. Now, look at that. Initially, when we did this, it tells us that what? That the home/chown, it cannot be what? Cannot be found. But now it's not giving us that error, right? So now if I do pass-wd, now I'm getting the correct thing. So I'm seeing /home/chown. So you can see that the Linux commands, you must understand when to use them as standalone commands or when to use them as what? With options for argument. And that's exactly what we've seen. So this time around, we used it with what? With argument, and then it did the right thing. Okay, but another drawback about the user add command is that we have to manually update the password. Okay, that's another drawback. And of course, we have to specify a argument, which is -m, before this command could actually create a home directory. Okay, that's another drawback. So let's exit. Now, so what command can I use that can actually do all of these things for me? That is the add user command. So now if I do sudo add user, all right, and I say, let's say BC, for example, right? And I press enter. Now look at that. Look at what that command did. The command created the user, created a group, created a group for BC, created a user called BC, added that user to the BC group. Because I mean, in Linux, any user that you create, of course, will have its own group, right? So there are two things. When you create a user, you're not just creating that user, you're creating what? A user and a group at the same time, right? So the user add also created a group and a user. But now this add user, all right, is more, iterative, right? Which means it shows us every step, everything that it's doing. So look at it. It created a user, created a group, okay, and then added the user to that group. Now it is prompting us to give this user what? A password. Okay, and you can see that it also what? Created a home directory for it. So we didn't have to specify -m to say, oh, now you have to create, it did all of those things for us. So now if I want to put a password, I can just put a password here. All right, and then it goes on, right? So the password was changed successfully. So now I can decide to fill the full name and all of that, but I don't need all of those things. I can just say yes, all right, and then just accept all the defaults. Now, if I do cat, all right, cat etc/pass-wd, right, I can see the BC user, all right, was created. Okay, so look at that. Now look at the difference between the two commands. So this one created, all right, chown. Now this X that you see here signifies the password for the user. This signifies the user ID, all right, and then the user group. Okay, and then you have all these column, okay, specifying some system information, and then the home directory of the user, all right, and then the shell, which means this user can also will also have a shell prompt where it can execute, all right, shell commands. Is that okay? And then for this one also, you have BC, you have the password, you have the user ID, you have the group ID, and then you have some other, all right, information right here, which are not displayed. And then you have the home, you have what? the bash command. So if you want to check, the password is actually encoded in another file. Okay, the password is encoded in another file. Okay, so the passwd is just a place where you can see, all right, the user. Okay, the user details that you have created. So if you want to check the password out, of course, not as if it's going to display the password for you in plain text, because I mean the password has been encrypted. So you can just do cat, all right, etc / it is called the shadow file. Okay, so inside of the shadow file is where you have, all right, all the user passwords. So you can see the password encryption right here. So all the password have been encrypted. For the shell as well, you can see the password has also been what? Has been encrypted. Right? So in the shadow file is where you have, all of the users with their passwords and some other sensitive details. So that is why you have the X here. So the X basically signifies what? The user's password. Is that okay? So let's clear the script. So that is user add, all right, and add the user. So basically we've seen how to add a user and how to do user, all right. Now let's go into, all right, permissions in Linux. It's a very important concept, right? So if I do ls-l, now I can see, all right, a few information here. Now, in addition to seeing, all right, the file name, on the left-hand side, I can also see the username, all right, that owns the file, and then the group that is also, all right, that has ownership of the file or the folder, right? So in this case, I am saying Ubuntu here. So this first one signifies the user, and this other one signifies the group. Like I told us, every user you create on a Linux machine, all right, creates a user and it creates a group. Okay, but of course you can also create your own group in Linux as well using the group add command, right? You can say group add, all right, and then the name of the group, and that will add a group for you. Is that okay? Now, so I just wanted to show us that, okay? Now, each user and each group has permissions, and you can actually separate their permission, okay? Now, on the leftmost side, you have the permissions. Now, the permission, all right, there are actually 3 permissions, all right? Basically, you can say 9 permissions, but grouped in 3s, okay? So you have the first one belonging to the user. So you have RW dash. Dash means, all right, that permission is not applicable. That's what dash means, which means the permission was not applied. So you have RW dash, that is basically specifying the user. Now, the dash that you have behind here is basically just saying, well, this is a file. Now, if it was a directory, you're going to see a D here. If it was a link file, you'll find an L there. But if it's a normal file, what you see there is what? Is a dash. Okay? Now, after this dash, you now have RW specifying the permission that the user has. So the first line here, RW dash, all right, that permission block belongs to what? The user. The RW dash here belongs to the group. The one here, R dash dash, belongs to others, which means anybody that neither belongs to this group or this user, which means any other person. For example, we have other users on the system right now. We have chown, we have BC, which means BC and chown can actually read this file. Okay, because I mean, they have the read permission because that is others. The only thing BC and chown cannot do is that they cannot write to this file, because based on the permissions we have here, it only says read. So read means you can view, but you cannot modify. Is that okay? You can view, but you cannot what? Modify. And so the same thing applies to all the other files, which means the only people who can read and write, okay, to these files, all right, are people that belong to the Ubuntu group. So chown and BC, they belong to their own group. So they cannot read and they cannot do anything to this file. Is that all right? So we need to take note of that. Now, this directory, all right, also belongs to the Ubuntu user and the Ubuntu group. So the Ubuntu user and the Ubuntu group, they are the only ones that have permissions to do anything, all right, on this directory. Okay? So now the user and the group, they have what? Read, write, execute. So read is to read something. So when you say R, R basically means to read, W basically means to write, and then X basically means to what? To execute. Okay, so read is to view a file without having the permissions or the rights to modify. Write permission basically means you can modify it. In fact, you can even delete the file. That is what write means. Okay. Execute basically means you can, if there is a shell script in that folder, you can actually run the script. All right, that is what execute means. You can run something. But execute does not give you the permission to write. Execute only gives you permissions to run from the name execute, which means you can run something, you can install something, you can execute a command. It gives you that right. Okay, now let us see how we can manipulate all of these things. Now, in Linux, there's a concept of U there means user, G equals to group, and O, all right, letter O equals to what? To others in Linux. Now, there's another one, which is A, which equals to what? That equals to all, which means everybody. All right. Now, these letters, all right, can be used, all right, to also assign permissions, right? So U is user, G is for group, O is for others, and A is for all. So now, how do we change permissions in Linux? How do we, all right, use these, read, W, and X, right? How do we change it? Remember, again, to recap, I have told us that your permission is basically in 3 levels, right? So you have the user, you have the group, and you have what? You have others. Which means you can decide to apply permissions to just the user without applying the same permission to the group. Right? You can decide to apply a permission to the group without applying the permission to the user, whichever way. And then you can decide to say, well, I don't want to even give others any kind of access at all. All right, you can also do that. Now, let's see how we can change permissions, all right, in Linux using this, right? Is chmod, which means you want to change the mode of something. You want to change the mode of the file. You want to change the mode of a directory. Okay. Now, the chmod command, all right, will execute because, as far as I'm executing the chmod command on the files and the directories that my user has access to, I don't need to specify the sudo command. Okay. Now, let's do something. Now, here on this file 2, I can see that my user has read-write access, okay? And I can also see that my group has read-write access. So let's say, for example, I don't want to give my group a write access. I want to give them execute access instead of write access. What do I do? So I can come here and I can say chmod G, look at that, minus W, okay? And then I specify the name of the file. So watch this, file2.txt. And then I press enter. Now, what does that mean? Of course, if you know your addition and subtraction, you know what dash means. Dash here now in the context of this permission means what? Subtract. Which means I am withdrawing the right permission, all right, that my group has. Okay, so now if I do ls-l, now look at what happens now. Now, the W has been what? Has been revoked. So my group only has what now? Only has a read access because I did chmod G minus W. So I told us that I said G is group, U is user, O is others, right? So I withdrew that permission. So my group can no longer write, all right, but they can read. Which means any other user that belongs to the Ubuntu group, right, cannot write to this file. But the Ubuntu user can still what? Can still write to this file. Is that okay? The Ubuntu user can what? Can still write. So it doesn't affect it. Because when the permissions are evaluated, it evaluates the permission of the user first, and then evaluate the permission of the group. So as far as the Ubuntu user is concerned, the Ubuntu user can still write to this file. You can know that by just going to say nano file2.txt, right? And then I can come here and I can still edit the file, all right? I can save, and I can exit, the Ubuntu user can still do that. But any user that belongs to the Ubuntu group cannot do that. Okay? Cannot what? Cannot do that. So we need to take note of that. Okay? So that is permission. Now, if I want to give my group execute permission, what do? I simply just say chmod g plus x, which means grant execute permission on what? On file2.txt. And I press enter. So if I do ls-l now look at that. My group now has what? Execute permission. You can see that the color of the file also changed because now it is seeing the file as what? As an executable file. Okay, by the time we get into shell scripting, you understand what the X command does. Without the execute permission, you cannot run a shell script on Linux. Okay, so you need to understand that. Is that okay? Now, we've given our group the execute permission, but our group does not have what? Does not have write access. So it means that if I say chmod now, let's say, for example, let's add BC, all right, to the Ubuntu group. And let's see what happens. Okay. So how do I add a user to a group? So I will say user mod -a. So I want to append a user. I can decide to say -g like this separately, but of course, we know by now that you can concatenate your commands. Okay. So -ag, right? And then I'll come here. So what's the name of the group? The name of the group is Ubuntu. So what user do I want to add? The user that I want to add is what? Is BC, right? And then I'll press enter. Now look at that. It says what? Permission denied, because the command that I want to execute will affect what? Will affect the etc/passwd directory. So I need to use what? Sudo to do that. Because that command is going to have to modify the etc/passwd file. So I need to put sudo to that. And then I say enter. Now, if I go over and I say sudo cat etc/passwd, now look at that. Now, BC now, is still here. But of course, I'm not going to see any information here because this passwd is only showing me information about the user. So if I want to check information about my group, where do I go? So I can come here and say etc/group. Right? So that's where my group information is. Now I can see here that Ubuntu group also has a new user appended to it now, which is what? Which is BC. Okay. Now, if I don't want to go all the way to using etc, I can just say ID, and then I can use the username BC and then press enter. And then right here, I can see that the BC user now is now a member of what? Of the Ubuntu group. Can you see that now? Is a member of what? Ubuntu group. Okay, so that is how to check, what group your user belongs to. Okay, so let's clear. So ls-l again to see. Now, BC now belongs to the Ubuntu group. Is that right? But remember, the group, as far as this file is concerned, they cannot what? They cannot read this particular file. Sorry, they cannot write to this file. They can only read and execute. So let's switch to BC user. Oh, sorry. All right. Okay, so now we are logged in as BC. Okay, so now if I do ls or pwd, for example, I can see that I'm in home/BC. Now, these files here, are available in the Ubuntu home directory. So I can say cd/home, /Ubuntu. Now, from the BC directory, or from the BC user, I have navigated to what? To the Ubuntu directory. Now let's do ls. All right, I can see all the files. Okay, so let's do ls-l. Now I can see all of the files. Now, why can I see all the files? Despite the fact that the files, belongs to Ubuntu user and Ubuntu group. Don't forget, BC is now a member of the Ubuntu group. Is that all right? BC is now what? A member of the Ubuntu group. So BC is able to also access, the Ubuntu directory, without any kind of error, because it's a member of the group now. Now, but remember, this particular file, okay, the group does not have read access. So let's say BC now wants to say, you know what, I want to edit this file too. Let's see what happens. So BC says nano file2.txt, and then it presses enter. Now look at the error that this file2.txt is what? Is unwritable. So that tells BC straight away that, wait, you have access to this directory, but this particular file, you cannot write to it. Because the permission states that what? It is only readable by the Ubuntu group. So by the virtue of being a member of that group, BC can read the file, but BC cannot write to the file, which means BC cannot modify the file. Is that okay? So what BC will have to do is to what? Exit out. Now let's see another file. So let's say BC says, okay, well, let me try another file, file3.txt. Now it says what? Directory dot is not writable. Okay, now that's a twist there. But I mean, you would say that, oh, what is directory not writable? I mean, BC is a member of the Ubuntu group. Okay, so that means BC should be able to what? Should be able to modify this file, being a member of the group. But the error that is given to us is what? Is that the directory is not what? Writable. Because you are trying to edit a file, all right, inside of a directory. Remember, BC is a member of the Ubuntu group, but BC is also a user on its own. Okay, now let's look at the permission, all right, of the Ubuntu directory. Okay, so I'm going to go one step back, cd dot dot. So let's do ls-l and let's see. Now look at the permissions. There are 3 directories in the home directory. There's the BC directory, there's the chown directory, and there's what? The Ubuntu directory. Now each of them have different permissions. Can you see the twist now? Which means even though the files have permissions assigned to them, the directory also has its own permission, right? So BC is trying to modify files inside of the Ubuntu directory. And so we got an error saying, oh, the directory is not what? Is not writable. Because although BC is a member of the Ubuntu group, okay, which has access to file 3, but look at the catch now. This Ubuntu directory, all right, does not have a write permission for what? For the group. Okay, which means this Ubuntu directory itself can only be writable by what? By the Ubuntu user. Can you see the catch now? Even though files inside of the, all right, the Ubuntu directory have given write permissions to the Ubuntu group, but the directory itself does not have what? A write permission. And that takes precedence over what is inside of the file. It takes precedence over the permissions of it takes precedence over the permission of the files inside of the directory. Can you see that now? So if the directory itself is not writable by the Ubuntu group, it also means that the file, even if the file has write access for the group, it does not apply. The permission of the directory will take what? Will take precedence over the permission of the file inside of the directory. I hope you understand that now. Okay, so here we see that the user Ubuntu has a read, write, and execute access, but the group only has what? Read access, not write access. But they have what? Execute access. And now look at that. Every other person, which is others, they don't even have any permissions at all on all of the folders. So what do we do? Okay, what do we do? Now here we can say sudo chmod. Okay, now what do we want to do? We want to do -r. All right, and we want to say -r means recursive. You should know that by now. -r means recursive. Now, what I want to do here is I want to say that, you know what? I want to give the group, which is G, all right, access to what? To write this particular folder, which means I am adding a write permission to what? To the Ubuntu group. Okay, and I press enter. Now look at that. I'm trying to do that using BC's user. So it's asking me for the password for BC, right? So let's put in the password. Now BC is not what in the sudo's file, which means BC is not fit, okay, to use elevated sudo privileges, because the sudo's file is what we're going to deal with when we get to the shell scripting side of things. Okay, but for now, let's exit out. and go back to the Ubuntu user, since the Ubuntu user is the one that has the file anyway. So let's say chmod -r. All right. So now I want to do, all right. So let's hold on a bit. So we're in the home/Ubuntu. So chmod, all right. Let's say plus, all right. No, sorry, -r to do recursively. And then what do we want to do? We want to do is say GW, all right, for what exactly? So we can say dot. Now, dot means the current working directory, right? So let's press enter. Okay. So now, if I do ls-l, what do I see? I'm still seeing permissions, all right, for, for the current working directory, right? So let's do ls-l/home. So let's see what we have. Now look at that. Now, the group now has what? Read and write permission. Okay. So you can see I did chmod -r, which is recursive. So everything inside of the directory, all right, I want to give them, all right, write access, particularly the group now. I want to give the group what? Write access. So now the Ubuntu folder now, the Ubuntu directory, the group now has what? Has write access. So now let's go back to BC and let's see if BC can now edit file 3. So now that the group, all right, has what? Has write access. All right, so you can see that every one of them here now, the group also has write access, has execute access. We've done that already before. But what our concern majorly is the Ubuntu directory. So the Ubuntu directory now has what? Has read, write, and execute access, but others still don't have access because, I mean, what we did only applied to what? To the group. So let's log in as BC now and let's see. Okay. Okay. So now if I do cd /home/Ubuntu. Okay, so if I do ls, so I can see all of that ls-l. So let's see if BC can edit file 3 now, since the group now has write access to the Ubuntu directory, right? So nano file3.txt. Look at that. Now it is not giving us any error again because the group now has write access to what? To file 3. And the Ubuntu directory itself now has allowed its group to be able to write to what? To its directory. So now BC can make any modifications and say, oh, thank you, all right, for granting, all right, for granting access. Okay, Control O to save, Control X to exit out. So BC now has the right to modify, all right, file 3, as well as any other files that the group is allowed to modify. So that is how the concept of changing mode, all right, works. So basically changing permissions. Now, one thing that I want us to look at in the next video is how can we use, all right, numbers, because there are two ways to actually use the chmod, right? One way is to use the UGO, all right, the letter pattern. Another way is to use what you call, all right, the numbers, which is 421. Now, 4, so in Linux, the read is equal to 4. All right, so read equal 4, write is equal to 2, and then execute is equal to 1. So altogether, if you add them all together, you have what? 7. Right? I'm sure you've seen permissions like chmod 777, chmod 640, chmod 686. You've seen all of those permissions before. Now, it's a combination of what? Of all of these things. All right, so you know already that you have read, write. So read here will mean 4, write here will mean 2, and execute will mean 1. So which means if I want to give just read write access, so I can do something like this. I can do something or give my user just read write access. I can say chmod, all right, so read write will mean what? 4, 2, that'll be 6. I can say 6. So this number 6 basically covers what? The user. Okay, so instead of doing something like u plus rw now, which means read write for the user, right? I can just simply say chmod 6. So that 6 covers the user and it means read write. In the next video, all right, we'll look at how you can apply these numbers instead of using, all right, just u plus rw or g plus rw or minus rw, right? We'll see how we can actually use numbers instead of using the alphabet. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to see exactly, all right, how to do that. Thank you and see you in the next video.